Hello, viewers. Welcome to the Sunday Guardian podcast by Joyeeta Basu. As you know, just last week there was a trade deal, free trade agreement that was signed between India and the UK after 3 years of negotiations, we are being told. And it is being called a template on which India can base its other trade deals on. And in this context, what exactly, which way are we going ahead with the India US trade deal, especially when it comes to a US administration that is under Mr. Trump? Uh, Being the way Mr. Trump is, how do we handle him? That also question comes into it. Now, who else to explain to you, what this is all about, especially the India UK FTA? I have a very special guest, Ambassador Yash Sinha. He was India's High Commissioner to UK between 2016 and 2018, and until 2023, post his stint as India's High Commissioner to UK, he was India's Chief Information Commissioner until 2023. Welcome to the show, Ambassador Sinha.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay. Now, tell me something. Uh, when you were High Commissioner between 2016 and 2018, was there any talk of India UK FTA?
This actually, to see it in perspective, this has been in the offing for quite some time. I would say the genesis was probably laid in 2007 8 when David Cameron was the Prime Minister. But the real push came, I think, in 2018 when the Joint Economic and Trade Committee met, the two commerce ministers, at that time Mr. Suresh Prabhu and Mr. Liam Fox from the UK side, they decided on a
When you were
2018. Yes, it was
2018?
January 2018, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
They decided to institute a joint trade review, which is the first step to identify tariff lines and products where they could sort of negotiate a free trade agreement. And since then, I think it was probably 4th of May 2021 during the virtual meeting between Prime Minister Modi and the then UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson that they came up with, of course, a roadmap 2030, and one of the components was an enhanced trade partnership. They declared that they want to work towards an FTA. But the actual negotiation started a year later, even though Prime Minister Johnson had said that he wanted an FTA by Diwali. I think that was being very ambitious, but I'm very happy that on the 24th of this month, both the prime ministers in their presence, the FTA was signed. It is, in my opinion, a historic agreement. One, because it's the first time that India has signed an FTA with a G7 country. And two, because of our long history, India and the UK, I think it was in the fitness of things that an FTA be signed with the sixth largest economy, India being the fifth or the fourth, heading towards the fourth, if not already the fourth largest economy in the world. So I think, and it does provide, in that sense, a template for negotiations with other partners, especially developed partners like the EU and the United States and others.
So, when it comes to the India UK FTA, what are the highlights, would you say? I mean, especially when if we are going to look at it and say, for example, trade in goods and trade in services. In trade in goods part, what are the things that stand out for you?
So you must understand that the UK is not among the top 10 trading partners of India as of now, and nor are we among the top 10 trading partners of the UK. So this deal would actually boost exports of both countries in trade in goods and services. The current trade level is about 50 billion.
I think 23 billion or
No,
something like that.
trade in goods and services,
Okay.
about 50 billion, and estimated to go up to over $100 billion
Yes.
by 2040 or
2030.
2030, sorry,
2030.
2030. And the boost to Indian exports would be to the tune of 10 billion pounds, but that's 2040. That's the estimates for 2040. And for the UK exports to India, about 15. Now, you must also realize that we have a favorable trade balance. So we export more than we import from the UK. Now, you specifically on goods, I think 99% of the tariff lines will now be tariff free, which is very big for India, I mean, for Indian exporters. And they would benefit in labor intensive areas, agriculture, uh, textiles, leather and footwear, gems and jewelry, and even manufactured goods, a whole array of manufactured goods, marine products, etc. So I think it is a win win situation for both. For the UK, we've agreed that we will either remove or reduce the tariffs on 90% of their imports from the UK, which would mean that immediately, that is over a 10-year period. Over a 10-year period, 85% would be tariff free over a 10-year period, including Scotch whisky. But right now, the UK, well, once it's ratified, but the British Parliament has to ratify this treaty, 64% of their exports would then be tariff free, which is significant because we are a developing country, they are a developed country. So obviously, they can afford to concede more than what we can. But on the whole, I think it is a very balanced deal. It will also have a spin off effect on investments. We are still negotiating the investment treaty because India is Indian company is the second largest investor into the UK after the United States. So,
What are the sectors that we have invested in the
well, the
UK?
big ticket ones are, of course, the Tata Group. When they bought Chorus Steel, they bought Jaguar Land Rover, TCS. These are the big, but there are other investments in IT and IT enabled services, and not so much in manufacturing, except for JLR and Chorus. So then a lot of smaller companies that have gone in. And when I was there, we started a thing called the Access India program to link the SMEs of both sides, both countries. So I think this deal would be very beneficial. There was some criticism that the MSME sector in India will suffer. That's not correct. I think they will benefit on the contrary
How?
because the MSME sectors are involved in things like textiles, for instance, handicrafts, agricultural products. Some there, I mean, they're not really all big companies that are involved, so they will benefit because they get duty free access. The UK market is not very big, but it's very selective, and they import a large number of, large quantity of their consumables, their food, etc. So this is a great opportunity for Indian exporters.
So I am hearing that India will get a level playing field primarily when it comes to textiles and garments, level playing field with Bangladesh and countries like Bangladesh
Vietnam.
and Cambodia and Vietnam. What kind of advantages they had that we were not being able to compete with them when it comes to exporting to the UK?
Well, Bangladesh, a lot of the manufacturing moved to Bangladesh because they had GSP preferences available, duty free export, which we didn't have. So there was immediately a price differential. We suffered because I think it was 10%, if I'm not
Because
mistaken.
it's because of being a LDC
LDC,
country.
that's correct. Now have a level playing field. In Vietnam, because also Vietnam, a lot of manufacturing shifted to Vietnam. In fact, you'd be surprised that a lot of, I'm talking about 10 years ago even, a large number or quite a significant number of Indian manufacturers or Indian origin invested in Bangladesh, set up factories there so they could avail of those benefits.
Okay.
So, now it is a level playing field. We must then get back that manufacturing capability, which we, of course, have. And our quality is very good. And not just the high end market, but even the mass produced low end market, we should do well in the UK. And that is also an entry point, even despite Brexit, it would still remain an entry point into the EU, into the
Okay.
continent, into Europe.
Yeah. So I'm also told that we are going to have some significant benefits when it comes to their primarily that seafood market. Apparently, it's a $5 billion total market that the UK has, and I think we are talking in terms of our farmers, shrimp farmers, and all being able to tap that market.
Of course, absolutely, because they're also strong in certain types of seafood, cod, etc. in the north, but shrimps, crabs, etc., which is a delicacy there in not only in the UK but elsewhere, we could emerge as supplier because India is a major supplier globally of marine products. And I recall when I was posted in Italy 30 years ago, or more than that, shrimps from Chilka, from Orissa, the Chilka Lake, etc., prawns, etc., very popular in Italy. And so, I mean, because there were phytosanitary conditions, also some sort of non tariff barriers erected, if they disappear, of course, they're very particular about quality and sanitary conditions. We'll have to adhere to very strict standards. But now we have, since we export globally, our marine products industry has really come up, and and they will definitely take advantage of the FTA.
And what about sectors like gems and jewelry? What are the other sectors that are likely to
So,
benefit?
leather and footwear, I think there we would definitely benefit. Gems and jewelry, we will definitely benefit. Some of our manufactured products, not necessarily the high end ones, the low end ones, some engineering goods, which automobile parts. Now, UK is also strong on automation and automobiles, but their supply chains are global. So they don't manufacture everything there. Now, if we can get them to route their supply chains through India, because we are very strong on automobile spare parts, that sector will benefit immensely
For us, but
for
I
us.
think they're also looking at some benefits when it comes to automobile parts and all. They are hoping for some benefit when it's
That's
come to
more
India.
high end. For
Okay.
instance, their cars. Now, Jaguar Land Rover. There are other manufacturers there, Aston Martin, for instance, but they are high end. And the market here is limited. It's growing, but it is limited. And to that extent, they would benefit, and they would, because the duties would come down drastically to 10%. I think from 110%, it'll be down to 10%. Of course, we've ensured that it is done gradually, and there are quotas that are being imposed every year, will be imposed every year for import of these high end cars.
What about whiskey? I'm told that whiskey is one sector that they're expecting about a $1 billion trade with India. But it seems many manufacturers here, our homegrown manufacturers, are a little unhappy with this.
But you know, the problem there is that our duties were 150% on Scotch whiskey.
Okay.
Now, but it was a luxury tax plus to protect our own domestic. Now, I think we've come to a stage in our development where we can go beyond protecting our domestic industry. We have some very fine spirit manufacturers in India, whiskey manufacturers, good single
Right.
malts being made here, and I think they will benefit the competition. And by the way, even now, some of our good whiskey manufacturers, if you go and buy an Indian whiskey, I mean, I'm talking about single malts, the I won't mention brands, but one of the upper end brands, they are more expensive than Scotch whiskey even today in India, in Delhi or Gurgaon, wherever. So when you get in these whiskies, or they're cheaper. And by the way, I read somewhere that even after it's ratified and these duties kick in, because for Scotch, if you remember, it's 150 to 75%. And then over a 10-year period, it will go down to 40%. So already there is a built in lag,
10 years.
10 years. But if it goes down to 75% immediately, it will benefit the consumer, but by not too much, I'm afraid. I think I read somewhere it'll be maximum 15 to 20% price differential. I mean, prices will go down. So then that's not really too much, but it is something that for people who drink whiskey, it is a saving of 15% or whatever that amount ultimately will be. So I think it's good in that sense. It's not just whiskey, by the way, even spirits as a whole. Now, mind you, when you're negotiating with the EU or the US, they have a very advanced spirits industry also. So they're looking at what we have done with the UK. Now, whether we will do the same with these countries, of course, the negotiators will decide. But there is a template.
So before we discuss the template, if you can talk a little bit in terms of how does this help India, as you talked about the supply chain, does it help us lessen our dependence on China? Number one, in any ways, and how does it integrate us more with the what we already talked about it a little bit, but maybe a little more in detail, integrate us with the global supply chain?
So, unfortunately, I don't think it's going to lessen our dependence on China, not immediately in any case, because the type of goods that we are importing from China are not made in the US. I mean,
UK.
sorry, the UK. And a lot of items which were earlier manufactured in the West and are now in the general have been outsourced to China. And that is where the whole problem is, because things like API for pharmaceuticals or critical minerals, rare earths, magnets, etc., which are critical for manufacturing in various spheres, China controls. And that is a result of, I would think, very misguided policies in the West. And now they are at the mercy of a country which is not known for being a great democracy or being very fair. So I think that sort of situation should, I mean, all of us, and not just the West, but all of us should have tried to avoid. And now we are grappling with that situation. Shortages here, informal quotas being already sort of, China sort of restricting exports of these items. So I think to answer your question, the UK deal may not offset that, because what we import from China would be different from what we import from the UK. But in certain high tech areas, for instance, medical equipment, the UK is very good. On the financial services, they are very good. Their fintech is very developed. So there are certain areas where we will benefit, and not necessarily lessen our dependence on China, but certainly won't find the need to go to China for that sort of technology, because the Technology Security Initiative, which was announced with the UK last year, and the Defense Industrial Partnership that was announced now as part of the vision the two prime ministers laid out, is very useful. Defense is a completely different sector. Defense, we have to ensure, the UK has to, not us, because the UK has a model of supply platforms, but transfer of technology, not much. So I think they need to get used to the Atmanirbhar Bharat concept. They need to work with Indian companies, and they are reluctant to go into G2G, government to government arrangements, while other like France and Israel and the Russia, of course, but the other partners are prepared to do that. So I think the UK needs to see if they really want to be a serious player in the defense sector in India, and they were in the past, as you're aware. We have relied on UK arms and planes, etc., in the past, but that was when we were just buying it. Now we want co-production, Atmanirbhar Bharat. So they have to adjust to that model. I'm sure they're looking at it seriously, because they have some first-class companies there in the UK.
So you think TOT will happen, meaning transfer of technology?
Yes, it has to, because otherwise, unless, I mean, they don't produce anything that is so urgently needed that we'll buy it offhand without transfer of technology. And the government's policy is very clear that we want to buy with transfer of technology, and if possible, co-production also. And the government is giving a lot of incentives, not just in the defense sector, but in other critical areas too, like semiconductors, etc.
So you talked about fintech. In the insurance sector, do you see the British coming in a big way?
I'm not sure, because you see, again,
I mean, does that help India? Because ultimately, it is all about helping Indian consumers or not.
I think, our insurance sector is actually quite developed now. If you see the sort
And
of,
expensive.
and expensive, but there is competition. So you go to these digital platforms and get a cheaper insurance than you would get if you went directly to a company, say an insurance company. If there is foreign competition, obviously it will benefit the consumer. I'm not sure how many British insurance companies are looking, because you see, we're also a bit protective about our own services industry. And while the FTA covers professional services, education
Yes.
services, financial services, digital trade, I'm not sure how much the UK is going to benefit from that. They will certainly, in certain fintech, they will, because they have a the city of London is a global financial hub. And I remember even when I was there, we were raising masala. Our companies were raising masala bonds, green bonds. Our International Solar Alliance, there was a lot of talk of green bonds being raised in London in the financial market stock exchange there. So, and companies did. The public sector, National Highway Authority, if I remember correctly, and others had listed masala bonds there. So I think, because London is a very important, continues to remain even after Brexit, a very important global financial center, we will certainly benefit from their expertise in fintech.
Right. So when it comes to, I would say, so what are the glitches? You want us
Yeah,
to ask that?
yeah. So no, so
What are the problems in this FTA?
so every agreement is a give and take, unless you're negotiating with one other country, which we will talk about later, I suppose.
Yes, we
Uh,
will. Yes, we will.
but uh, but I think as far as the give and take is concerned, as I said, it's a very balanced agreement. One area where I had some issues where I felt that maybe we're opening the Pandora's box is government procurement. But I see that the agreement has certain safeguards in terms of the amounts that can be done, the turnovers of companies that are investing, etc. Certain sectors being protected in government procurement from foreign competition. So I think we have built-in safeguards, but I'm not sure how that will work. Only once it starts time, because mind you, government procurement is a huge sector. The Brits had calculated that in a year, 40,000 tenders are issued to the tune of 38 billion pounds. It's a huge amount. So obviously they were looking at it very carefully and hoping, probably salivating at getting into that sector. But there are safeguards built. We'll have to see how that works and whether that could also be a template with our negotiations with the EU and the US.
And you said something about the climate.
Yeah, so that's the second point. That's important. The carbon border adjustment mechanism. That's the carbon tax, as is commonly known. There is no agreement there. It kicks in 2027 in the UK, and if I remember correctly, it's about 19%. Now, if that is imposed on Indian exports, unilaterally, then that would have a problem. And India has made it clear that that would have consequences. So I do hope they find by between now and then modus vivendi where this tax is not imposed or there is a way out. Because then, if we take reciprocal action, then obviously it will
The whole thing is
undermine.
nullified.
Well, not completely nullified, but yes, I mean, to a large extent, it becomes infructuous.
Okay. So,
So these two areas, I think, and of course, the investments is a work in progress. So that will happen at some point because it's
yeah.
not included in this agreement.
Yeah, carbon tax, if they try to, I mean, given that they kind, I mean, they are the bigger consumers, isn't it, when it comes to energy and fossil fuel and all. So I think it's a little unfair, but I guess, yeah, they will sort it out. Now, when it comes to, does it help us in any way in terms of India, UK, strategic relationship?
I was wondering whether you'll come to that, but you have. Yes, I think it will. But to what extent, I can't say. Because we have some problems, and you're aware of those problems, whether it is Pakistan and the mollycoddling of Pakistan traditionally. And I always maintain that it was midwifed by the Brits, Pakistan, an artificial construct. So they've been very liberal or look the other way as far as Pakistan's sponsorship of terrorism is concerned. They condemn the act of terrorism, they condemn Pahalgam, but they're hesitant or refuse to call out Pakistan as a perpetrator or as a epicenter of terrorism. And it's strange because if you recall, in 2001, after 9/11, the epicenter was Pakistan, identified that region, especially Pakistan. It continues to remain so even today. And the hesitancy of UK and the US and some of our other partners in naming and shaming Pakistan is disappointing. But I think slowly things are changing. For instance, the Khalistanis and others who
Yeah.
were attacking Indian property, and the incidence of that has gone down. I think the tolerance levels now are much lower as far as Britain is concerned, and they know the consequences also. So I think I will see a change there. I see that it will not disappear, but it will go down because they say freedom of expression. And the third area are the fugitives, the economic
Yes.
offenders. Now, the economic offenders, unfortunately, I think it doesn't behove the UK to be known or have a reputation. It has a reputational damage, a reputation of being a safe haven for economic offenders or fugitives from justice, not just from India, but from Africa and other countries which were at one time part of the British Empire. So I think it's in UK's interest, certainly in ours, but in the UK's interest that this whole extradition process moves. And I was involved in a couple, so I know how the wheels move. And in one case, we had a conviction right up to the Supreme Court. but the then Home Secretary refused to sign off, and they said there was a legal hurdle, and that legal hurdle, I understand informally, is the gentleman has applied for asylum. Now, if you encourage that sort of thing, I mean, one is the legal process, and the legal process in UK is very sound and generally very fair. And the other is when there is a political consideration that comes in. So I think the problem becomes more political than legal. Of course, we have to argue our case well. In this particular case I referred to, we had excellent support from the Crown prosecutors. So I think we need
Which
to.
case was this?
There was the Malia case.
Malia case. Okay.
So it went right up. But more important, I think there was some agreement or MOU signed between CBI and their National Crime Control Agency or something during Prime Minister Modi's visit. So that I haven't seen the print. I haven't seen what the fine print is, but I hope it will further enhance cooperation between the two investigating agencies and ensure that there are, because the track record for extradition from the UK is abysmal.
Abysmal.
I mean, we've got one bookie, I think that's about all in the last 10 years, a cricket bookie. So I think we need to increase cooperation there. And I think the FTA, in the larger scheme of things, more than the FTA, the enhanced partnership itself will ensure that there is a more result-oriented cooperation rather than just, exchanges of delegations, etc. So we need some of these people back. And
Yes.
I hope we can clear all the legal hurdles there, and the UK is able to send them back.
And you also were talking about before this program about investment part is not yet worked out.
Yeah, because that's important because, as I said, India is the second largest investor, Indian companies into the UK. So I mean, you have a double contribution agreement that will help our professional class, social security payments, etc. People who go for short-term visas. So obviously, there we need to discuss more how we can provide better investment protection to each other. UK is a traditional investor, again, not this, I think the sixth largest investor into India. So I think we need to do some work, and it will be done because I think that shouldn't be that difficult. We've not held the FTA hostage to that. So we've done the FTA and now we move on to that. The other area, of course, is mobility. The mobility, what people expected, the easier flow of people, I think we had very high expectations because when a large number of illegals go, then that affects. And I know that in the UK we have, we don't know the numbers. I mean, the British know the numbers. We don't necessarily sort of agree on the numbers, but there are a significant number. So we need to resolve these problems and then you'll have better mobility. And don't forget that Brexit was fought on immigration. So you must be sort of realistic in what to expect. Within those constraints, this FTA will provide for Indian professionals to go and work there temporarily and come back. So that's good. I mean, you'll have paramedics and doctors and lawyers, etc., being able to go
Easier visa
easier.
process,
That's right.
perhaps.
I hope that's a big.
Which brings me to the US and Mr. Trump, of course. I mean, given the kind of stuff that we keep hearing about, he is all for winning, and whatever the deal with he has had with the EU, with Japan, at least he's saying that it's a very it's not a give and take deal. It is all give to the US. So how will India, I mean, handle Mr. Trump given that he is always talking about make America great again, it's all about America first. And how can this deal that India UK have struck FTA, how can that serve as a template?
This is the $1 million question, really, right now.
I
And
know.
I,
It's like
and as a disclaimer, I haven't dealt with the US bilaterally in terms like I did with the UK, but getting a sense of where things are. You see what Japan has agreed to. They have promised an investment of $550 billion. They've agreed to, I think, a 15% tariff. The
but
EU.
they're saying it's mostly loans.
Yeah, so that's it. So the thing is that we buy a lot from the US is our largest trading partner. The last stats I saw, I think for 24-25, was I think 132 billion or something dollars, which is they're the largest trading partner. So obviously for us, that deal is the most important, crucial deal. Now we are looking at a US which has completely changed in terms under President Trump. I mean, the Liberation Day tariffs on the 1st of April kept keeping it in abeyance. But all the deals, except if I remember UK, the UK US, there was just a 10% sort of tariff imposed. But importantly, both Japan and UK have got favorable terms for their automobile exports, especially Japan, which is a big win for Japan. So we have to look around at what the EU has done. EU has accepted 15% tariffs, but not everyone is happy. France is very unhappy. They've conceded too much. So you must appreciate that when you're talking to someone like President Trump and the US administration current to that, I mean, they are coming from a position of strength. They are the world's largest economy. So if you expect that you're going to have complete parity, it's not going to happen. It doesn't happen that way. And you've seen countries successively succumb, and developing countries, Indonesia, Vietnam, Philippines, they've all accepted. Now,
They've all capitulated, is it?
absolutely. Now, what we will do, from what I understand, is protect certain sectors like, say, agriculture, which is very important to us. At the same time, open up on procurement. You have a template that you have with the UK. You will have to accept some tariff on your goods. You can't go duty free. It's around 25% now. So
50% they're asking for the steel,
yeah, so steel and aluminium, there's a
aluminum.
separate track there. So there are certain sectors where you will have to concede, and certain sectors where you will have to, where you will try your best to protect, like agriculture. So I think it's going to be a down to the wire negotiation, and the first August deadline finishes in 2 days. So hopefully they'll. But today I read somewhere that they're talking. President Trump, or at least his negotiators, are talking about maybe a sort of 25% duty. Now that is not good for us. 25% is very high. But whether we settle for a 15% tariff on our products with safeguards built in, I cannot say it because, as I said, I'm not really involved in the negotiations. But one thing we definitely can do and must do is what the EU and Japan have done: promise huge investments. Our private sector already is invested, and they can invest more in the US, and purchases. Now we are buying huge quantities of oil, gas from the US. We can step up our purchases. Other sectors, we have to be careful, defense in particular. We need to be very, very mindful of the reliability factor, in terms of supply. So you can pick up platforms where you need them, transport aircraft. We've already done that from the US. And in certain areas, we may not.
You mean to say not critical defense
No, I'll
imports?
just give an example. For instance, fighter aircraft. We needed fighter aircraft. Will we go in for the F-35? I'm not so sure. I mean, I'm not a decision maker, nor am I an expert. But if I had a say, I would be very wary.
Why are you saying that?
Because during times of need, you don't have the source code. I mean, the West, in any case, don't provide too much of the source code. But the tap can be switched off and on. There are a lot of conditions that they impose. Not that Pakistan has followed the conditions all the time on their F-15s, but the fact is that they impose a lot of conditions which may be too cumbersome for us to accept, and perhaps also we would see the infringement on our sort of sovereignty, etc. So certain platforms, yes, certain platforms may not be. So that, of course, the defense planners and our decision makers will decide. But to come back to the point that we can buy much more from the US, and we should commit to do so by offsetting, that will offset against the duties or tariffs that the US wants to impose on our sector, on us and our investments. If we can get our private sector to really step up as far as it, because his goal, President Trump's goal, is to bring reshoring of manufacturing, bring it back to the US. Whether it works or not is not the point. The point is that you make a commitment. Okay, I am like X group, I manufacture ABC. I promise to do it in Dearborn, Michigan, or somewhere there, set up a plant. You can do that. I mean, you can commit to do that. How it is actually done, of course, will take time, and different modalities. Whether it's even economically viable or not, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is that what is
Make
happening,
the commitment.
make the commitments, and what is happening now is actually going to affect the consumer in the United States.
Yes.
He or she is going to be paying more. and we'll find out sooner than later, how that impacts.
I mean, if from 1st of August, that's in fact Mr. Trump said that I'm going to give them a 25% tariff. They are our friends, but I'm going to impose
That's right.
25% tariffs from 1st of August. The APIs, the medicines, I think won't that go up?
If they impose tax on our pharma, our generics, then their consumers are going to suffer. It's not just India, but also countries like Ireland, Denmark, and the EU that are suppliers. But India is a major supplier of generics. So I think the consumer will definitely be impacted. Because when Indian generics started coming into the market, you could see the prices in the pharmacies in the US started dropping. And now, once people are used to paying an X amount for, say, a common drug like aspirin or paracetamol or whatever, and then suddenly it goes up by 30% or 20%, then obviously the people will feel the pinch. So I'm hopeful that this will be kept in mind, because I don't think the consumer can be expected to take suffer more than beyond a point. I mean, certain rises expected. People are expecting prices will go up, but not by 30%. So pharmaceuticals is one area where I think the US itself will be careful on how they proceed. At least I hope so.
What
Because
about mobile phones?
now we see, I read somewhere that the
We are
largest
now the
number
largest
one, yeah,
supplier.
Apple is making the maximum phones in India, and at one time President Trump said he's going to put 25% duty on that. But then who will suffer? It will be the people, the US, that will suffer. And I think the US should be happy that they have managed to move from China to India, and Apple has moved from China to India, and we are now selling phones to them. See, the problem is you have to differentiate between who is your rival and who's your partner.
Exactly.
And if you can't do that, and if you treat
Absolutely.
everybody the same way, then you
Absolutely.
have a problem.
And sometimes it seems, in fact, we have been writing about this in the Sunday Guardian as well, that, you know, unless and until you make that distinction, you think that China is your great friend. Well, I think there's some fundamental problem there. And India is an enemy. Sorry, that's a little.
That's carrying it too far, but yes, the answer is the art of the deal. So you should know how to make the deal. That's important.
So, India FTA discussion took place for over 3 years, and we have had around 5 rounds of discussion with the US for this trade deal. Sixth round, I'm told, will be held sometime in August, and apparently the US team has been told that our gulf is too wide between the two countries, so it is not going to be bridged that easily. So, do you think we will have a trade deal during Mr. Trump's tenure at all?
Well,
Or are you looking at a mini trade deal, some kind of
yeah, so
concessions
I
here and
don't
there?
think we can have a encompassing trade deal like we had with the UK, pretty broad based. If we can, that will be excellent, because, as I said, US is our largest trading partner. But even if we are able to get away with, a smaller deal in terms of an early harvest, so to speak, and stave off the high tariffs, you will not stave off the tariffs completely, but stave off the high tariffs for a later date till we negotiate a better deal. That would be a win-win for us. But I hope we can do that.
Take temporary measures, that's what you're saying.
Well, basically, early harvest would be in certain sectors. Certain sectors you open up, you make commitments to buy, you make commitments to invest, and that becomes a sort of mini trade dealer. And the duty tariffs are staved off. I mean, they're kept in abeyance for a year, 2 years, whatever. That would be for us. In my opinion, I think I wouldn't say the best outcome. The best outcome would be a proper deal, but I'm not sure whether we have time for that. But certainly a better outcome than a unilateral imposition of tariffs by the US.
What about the threats of imposing sanctions and 500% tariff if you buy Russian oil that is coming from Lindsey Graham, and also Mr. Trump is also echoing that. Do you think he's serious about it?
Well, that will also depend on the relationship with Russia, because at one time, Mr. Trump had turned US policy on Russia on its head, basically, in terms of the war with Ukraine. Now he's getting slowly frustrated with the war going on, carrying on for longer. I think he gave 12 days, but the Russians are not particularly bothered about that. It seems they're not. So I think everything will depend on how this pans out. If there is, if they get together, because the Europe is, that's another reason why they say they struck a deal with the US, the trade deal, is because they expect that the US will be more closely aligned now on their position in on the US, sorry, the Russia-Ukraine war. Now, if that happens, then obviously there will be implications. Till now, for our energy security, we've been very clear. Our minister is on record saying that we'll have to look after our economy and our requirements. So we buy where the oil is the cheapest. But when it becomes very difficult, and I remember because I handled Iran. So when I was posted here many 10, 12 years, 13 years ago, there was an issue with Iran, if you recall. We couldn't buy oil. There was sanctions by the US and the West, but we found ways, I won't say of circumventing it, but going around it. For instance, we opened an escrow account in India where we paid for Iranian oil in rupees, but the quantities kept going down. So, I mean, we'll have to look at inventive ways to deal with it, but that's a bridge right now that we haven't reached yet. So, when we reach it, when that decision is taken, we'll see. Because India buys from, I think, 40 odd suppliers. So, we have quite a vast sort of network of suppliers. So, Russia, we were not buying from initially, if you recall, very little. It's only when the prices dropped that we started buying from Russia because for them it was important. That was a major item that they could sort of sell.
Yes, I remember at one point of time it was we were buying primarily from Iraq.
That's right.
Iraq and Saudi Arabia.
That's
Suddenly,
correct.
this Russia, it was kind of a windfall deal.
True.
But yes, I think so. Ultimately, it's all about how you handle, think short term when it comes to President Trump.
Yes, we'll have to handle it. I think our negotiators would have a fair idea was what to expect now in terms of what may happen if we don't have a deal, or if we can have an early harvest or a mini deal, which would then stave off some of the adverse impact of the tariffs. So I can only hope for the best because we don't. We'll get to know shortly as what will happen.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on this show. It's been very interesting. I'm certain my viewers will like it. I hope to bring you back sometime again later.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, viewers, for watching. Until the next time.